Jack Thompson stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles after another night on the cold streets of Los Angeles. The sky was still overcast, and the morning fog enveloped the city like a sad blanket. He stood up, shaking off the dust from his threadbare clothes, and walked along the sidewalk, watching the scurrying faces of passers-by. To them, he was invisible, just another homeless person looking for temporary shelter. "One more day, Jack. Let's move on," he muttered to himself, forcing a smile that barely reached his eyes. His past as a soldier still weighed heavily on his mind, each memory a reminder of what he had lost. The cheers of their unit, the shared laughter, and finally the deafening silence that followed the conflict. He had fought for a country that had somehow forgotten him. While walking towards Los Angeles International Airport, Jack noticed the frantic movement of people traveling to different destinations. The smell of fresh coffee and bakery pastries filled the air, a stark contrast to the reality of her life. He remembered when he was part of this world, when the future seemed full of promise and opportunity. But all of that had disappeared in the blink of an eye, and now he found himself trapped in a never-ending cycle of survival. As Jack approached the airport, he saw a group of men having a heated conversation near one of the terminals. The tone of their voices was low, but the intensity was palpable. He hesitated, curiosity pulling him closer. "Are you sure everything is ready?" one of the men asked, his expression grim. "The plan is foolproof. No one will suspect us," replied another with a frightening smile. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't understand exactly what was being planned, but something in her words made him feel like it was serious. He couldn't just ignore it. "I need to know more," he thought, as his heart raced. He approached discreetly, trying to capture more details. "It's just a plane. It's not like we're attacking a building or anything. Security is weak, and no one will stop us," said the third man, laughing nonchalantly. Jack realized that it was an imminent attack. Adrenaline took over him, and the urgency to act overcame the fear he felt. He knew that any move he made could be interpreted as madness. But what if I'm right? What if they actually do this? The thought of so many lives in danger made his blood boil. He couldn't stay still. What was left of his morale and his military training cried out for action. Jack took a deep breath, deciding it was time to step in. "You cannot do that," shouted Jack, his voice echoing in the crowded terminal. The men turned, surprised by the homeless man's sudden appearance. "You will put lives at risk." He looked at the passing passengers, ignoring what was happening. "Wake up. We need to do something." "Look who thinks he's the hero," scoffed one of the men, while the others laughed. Jack could feel the looks of contempt and disbelief. He knew that everyone would see him as a lunatic, but the urgency of the situation was greater than his concern for other people's opinions. He needed to act. "If you don't do anything, you will regret it," Jack shouted, the determination in his voice echoing among those present. He felt the weight of his decision, but the possibility of saving lives was more important than the fear of what others would think. With his heart racing, he turned and ran towards the departure gate, determined to do whatever was necessary to prevent the approaching tragedy. Jack Thompson ran through the Los Angeles International Airport terminal, his heart beating frantically like a drum. He avoided the suspicious looks of passengers and security guards patrolling the area. Adrenaline drove him, but the reality of his condition as a homeless man made him feel invisible, as if no one could hear his cry for help. He remembered his military training, how he was always taught to act under pressure. Now, he needed to use this discipline to save lives. Jack didn't have time to care about the slight. He needed to get on the plane. With one last glance at approaching security, Jack darted toward boarding. The plane door was closing, but he managed to squeeze through the opening before it was too late. As soon as he entered, the atmosphere changed. The smell of metal and leather seats was oppressive. The plane was almost full, and all eyes were on him. "Listen, you are all in danger," Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the murmur of the cabin. "There's a bomb on this plane. You need to get out now." The passengers began to look at each other, confused and scared. A gray-haired woman raised an eyebrow and said mockingly, "And who do you think you are? A hero? Go away, you lunatic." "It's no joke," Jack exclaimed, noticing that some of the flight attendants were approaching him with expressions of concern. "You guys need to listen to me. I heard what they were saying. They're going to blow up this plane." The crew, instead of believing him, began to surround him, trying to contain him. One of the commissioners, with a look of skepticism, said, "Sir, we need you to calm down. There is no threat here." "No, you don't understand." Jack insisted, desperate. "If you don't listen to me, you'll die. I'm not lying." He looked into the eyes of the passengers, searching for a spark of belief. "Please, you have to believe me. Time is running out." The laughter and whispers subsided, and a tense silence took over the cabin. Some people started pulling out their cell phones, thinking about calling security. A young woman, with a worried expression, raised her hand and said, "Maybe he's right. We need to check this out." But most still looked at Jack with disdain, as if he were just another disturber of the peace. "Listen," Jack shouted again, his voice now shaking with frustration. "If you think I'm here to clown you, you're wrong. I have nothing to lose. But you have your lives, your families. Please do something before it's too late." Panic began to slowly spread among the passengers. Some began to whisper, and others to stand up, looking at the emergency exits. Jack knew he needed to do something more drastic for them to finally take him seriously. He approached one of the commissioners and, his eyes burning with determination, said, "If you don't listen to me now, when the bomb goes off, it will be too late for all of us." The commissioners exchanged looks, undecided. Jack realized that, at that critical moment, the lives of 250 people were in his hands, and he could not fail. With one last deep breath, he prepared to fight against unbelief and, if necessary, against those who did not want to hear the truth. The turmoil inside the plane was palpable. Jack, still with the adrenaline pumping through his veins, felt that every second counted. He struggled against the security guards, who were pulling him out of the aircraft. Agent Sarah's voice stood out amidst the noise, and Jack, without even knowing it, had found an ally. "Wait a second," Sarah shouted, raising her hand for the security guards to stop. His expression showed a mixture of skepticism and concern. "Is what you're saying serious?" Jack, now free from a security guard's grasp, took a deep breath. "Yes, there's a bomb on that plane. I heard the guys talking about it. They're going to blow up everything and everyone here." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She wasn't the type to believe the delusions of homeless people, but there was something about Jack that made her hesitate. He didn't look like a lunatic. His intensity and desperation were genuine. "Are you sure? How do you know that?" "I was there. I heard." Jack gestured with his hands, his voice rising in fervor. "They were talking about the flight, about an attack. We need to act fast." Tension among the plane's passengers was growing, and curiosity began to replace the contempt they initially felt for Jack. A woman with curly hair and wide eyes, who had heard the conversation, stood up. "He may be right. Look at him. He doesn't seem to be lying." "No, he's just homeless." A man in a suit, who was sitting in the front row, retorted aggressively. "Let's stop wasting time on this. We need security, not a lunatic." Sarah, realizing the situation was about to get out of control, decided to intervene. "Sir, please listen. If there is even a slight chance that he is telling the truth, we need to investigate." She turned to Jack, her voice softer. "Can you take me to the men who were talking? We need proof." Jack nodded, feeling a surge of hope. Yes, they were near the door, near the emergency exit. They had a backpack. It looked suspicious. Agent Sarah looked at the surrounding security guards. "Call the airport security team. We need an immediate investigation." Meanwhile, the passengers began to murmur among themselves. The man in the suit was clearly in doubt now, and others began to stand up anxiously. "What if it's true? What will we do?" A young woman, with a cell phone in her hand, said in a low voice, looking around as if waiting for someone to calm her down. "I'll make sure everything is okay," Sarah replied, trying to remain calm. "We need to stay together and follow instructions." Jack, still panting, felt the pressure building inside him. He knew that every second wasted could be fatal. "Please, let's go. We need to act now," he pleaded, Feeling the urgency of the situation, Sarah waved to one of the security guards. Go get the disarmament team. And you. She turned to Jack. Tell me more about what you heard. What was their plan? Jack began to report what he had heard. There were 3 men. They were preparing, talking about how easy it would be to cause panic, and he hesitated for a moment, remembering the fury in her eyes. They wanted to make a statement, something about how the world wasn't listening. The passengers, now silent, listened attentively. The looks of disbelief were turning into genuine concern. Sarah looked at Jack, admiring his courage. You did the right thing by coming here. Let's find out the truth. The tension in the air was almost palpable, each passenger aware that their lives were at risk. Jack felt the weight of responsibility, but also a new determination. He was no longer just an invisible man on the streets of Los Angeles. He was someone who could make a difference. And even if the others couldn't see it right away, he was ready to fight for their lives. Jack was handcuffed, his wrists pressed against the weak metal cuffs, but his mind was racing with the urgency of the moment. He anxiously watched the security guards who moved like shadows inside the plane, their black uniforms contrasting with the light color of the fuselage. The sound of rushing voices and the clanking of security equipment filled the air as Jack tried to contain the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He knew time was running out. "We need more men here," shouted one of the security guards, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. He crouched down next to the luggage compartment, examining every corner as if his life depended on it. Jack held his breath and, in the midst of the commotion, he thought of each of the people inside, confident that they were safe, unaware of the terror that awaited them. "Please find it. We don't have time." Jack couldn't contain himself. He turned to one of the officers, an older man with a stern expression. "I told you. There's a bomb. You need to believe me." The security guard ignored him, focused on his work. Jack realized that as much as he wanted to scream, the situation was beyond his control. He looked at Agent Sarah, who had been the only one to listen to his story, with a serious face. She was on the phone, speaking quickly to someone on the other end. Her gaze caught his for a brief moment, and Jack felt a spark of hope. "You were right, weren't you?" Sarah said, as she ended the call. "I just hope they find the bomb in time." His voice was filled with a mixture of disbelief and relief. "I'm not sure how much time we have, Sarah," Jack replied, his tone serious. "They may be waiting for the right moment." The minutes seemed to drag by. Jack watched the security guards rummaging through suitcases, opening luggage, while panic began to spread among the passengers. He could hear murmurs and whispers, people trying to make sense of the situation, some looking at him suspiciously, others with genuine concern. "Who is this guy?" a man muttered. "Why is he here?" "I'm someone who tried to warn them," Jack replied, his voice rising a little. "You have to believe it's true. If they don't find it now, it might be too late." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, one of the security guards shouted, "Here, I found something." Jack felt his heart race as the team gathered around the baggage compartment. He waited, each second dragging by, as security guards examined the suspicious box with wary care. "It's a bomb!" one of the security guards exclaimed, his face pale. "Call the experts." The news that a catastrophe had been averted began to spread. The murmur among the passengers turned into cries of relief and anxiety. Jack, still handcuffed, couldn't help but feel a mix of euphoria and despair. He had done what he needed to do, but the price of that was still being counted. "You did it, man," Sarah approached him, her expression now a little softer. "You saved these people." "I didn't do anything alone," Jack replied, his gaze dropping to the floor. I just couldn't sit still." "That's what a hero does," she insisted, holding his gaze. "You must give yourself credit." The sound of the approaching police siren interrupted the conversation. Jack could hear the commotion of officers preparing to take charge of the situation. He couldn't help but feel a knot in his stomach at the thought of what came next. Despite having saved lives, he knew he would still face the consequences of his actions, and the way the world viewed him would not change instantly. "Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe," one of the security guards said, pulling Jack lightly. He hesitated for a moment, looking at the plane, at the people on board, now safe. A sense of accomplishment began to form within him, a small flame of dignity that had been extinguished for so long. "I just hope they understand," Jack murmured, as he was led out of the airport, the Los Angeles sun shining brightly, as if it was putting a new focus on his life. He had faced his demons and, somehow, had found the path to redemption, even if he was still trapped among the shadows of the past. Jack Thompson sat on an uncomfortable bench in the airport lounge, his heart still racing with adrenaline. He had gone from an invisible homeless man to a recognized hero, but conflicting emotions still tormented him. The airport was full of people, but despite the hustle and bustle, he felt isolated, as if an invisible barrier separated him from others. The feeling of being watched was constant, and he wondered if people still saw him as a lunatic or if they now viewed him with respect. As he was reflecting, a woman in an impeccable suit approached him. "You're Jack, right?" she asked, her gaze steady and determined. "My name is Karen. I'm the airline manager. I want to personally thank you for saving so many lives." "I didn't do any more than anyone else would," Jack replied, shaking his head, still surprised by the attention he was getting. "I just thought I had to let you know." "No, you acted when no one else had the courage," Karen insisted, sitting down next to him. "We are offering you an opportunity. We want you to become a security officer on our team. With your knowledge and experience, you can make a difference." Jack looked at her in disbelief. "A job? I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I'm not a soldier anymore." "You're a survivor, Jack. And, most importantly, you have courage." "That's what we need," Karen said, with an encouraging smile. "The past may be a heavy shadow, but you have the chance to illuminate it with something new." He hesitated. The idea of a job, of a new life, seemed like a distant dream. "What if I fail? What if people don't trust me?" "You will not fail," she replied firmly. "And you're going to show everyone that second chances exist. Think about it. Can we schedule a meeting to discuss the details?" Jack nodded slowly, still absorbing her words. As the conversation unfolded, he realized that this could be the change he had been longing for. But on the other hand, a shadow cast itself over his new hope. Since the attack, he had started receiving anonymous messages on his old, beat-up cell phone, subtle threats that left him uneasy. "You shouldn't have interfered," one of them said. "The game is not over yet." The messages tormented him. He had no idea who could be behind them. The feeling of being watched kept him on constant alert. After his conversation with Karen, he decided he needed to deal with this before it became a bigger problem. The idea of losing his new job opportunity terrified him, and he knew he needed to protect his new life. "Dude, how are you?" asked a man who sat next to him, noticing Jack's worried expression. "You seem worried." "It's just some personal stuff," Jack replied, trying to hide his uneasiness. "Nothing I can't handle." "If you need someone to talk to, I'm here," the man offered, gesturing with his head to the other passengers chatting animatedly around them. "Sometimes just talking helps." "Thanks," Jack murmured, appreciating the offer, but the feeling of discomfort persisted. He realized that, even surrounded by people, loneliness still accompanied him. The challenge of reintegrating into society was greater than he imagined. The memories of the war, life on the streets, and now, the anonymous threats, all of this formed a tangle that he needed to unravel. That night, as he looked up at the starry sky through the window of his small bedroom, Jack decided he couldn't let fear rule his life again. He needed to confront the messages and find out who was behind them. With this determination, he began to plan how he could investigate, even if it meant revisiting shadows of his past that he would rather forget. Now, more than ever, he needed courage, not just to save lives, but also to save himself. Jack was sitting in the small security room at the airport, analyzing the anonymous messages he had received since becoming a hero. The words were direct and threatening, insinuating that the attempted attack had not been an accident, but a much deeper plan. He couldn't ignore the feeling that he was being watched, and the idea that someone from his past was behind it made him uneasy. The restless mind of a veteran, always on alert, began to chart a path. With renewed determination, Jack decided to investigate on his own. He started talking to people he knew from the army and looking for information about old colleagues. After a few weeks of research, a shocking revelation emerged. Nick, his former war friend, now radicalized and involved in terrorist activities, was the mastermind behind the plan. Frustration and fear mixed in his chest as he remembered the moments he shared with Nick before life separated them. The thought of confronting Nick terrified him, but Jack knew he needed to act. On a rainy night, he decided to go to Nick's last known address, an apartment in an abandoned neighborhood. The way there was full of memories. He remembered the laughter, the promises to take care of each other, and the camaraderie that had existed between them. But now, it all seemed like an illusion. When Jack arrived at the building, darkness enveloped the place, and an oppressive silence hung in the air. He climbed the stairs slowly, hearing the creak of each step as if it were a warning. When he reached the right floor, he took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Nick, it's me, Jack." His voice echoed through the empty hallway. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the door opened, revealing a Nick disfigured by the rage and radical ideology that consumed him. "Jack, what are you doing here?" He seemed surprised, but not entirely surprised. Jack realized that, behind the fury, there was a lost friend. "I came to find you, Nick. We need to talk," Jack insisted, trying to remain calm. "I know what you were planning. You do not have to do this. We can find another way." Nick laughed, a bitter laugh. "Other way? You don't understand, Jack. The world needs a drastic change. I'm doing this for us, for everyone left behind." "That's not change, Nick. It's destruction," Jack exclaimed, stepping forward. "You are about to hurt innocent people. Remember who we were. We fight together, not against others, but for their protection." Jack's words seemed to hit a nerve in Nick. He hesitated, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. "You don't know what I went through, what I saw. They left us, Jack. The government, society, everyone has abandoned us. I know, but the answer is not more violence. This only generates more hate and pain. Look at me, I'm homeless, but I chose to fight for life, not death." The passion in Jack's voice began to break down the barrier Nick had built around himself. "What if I give up? What happens then?" Nick questioned, voice shaking. "Then you can live. You can help other people not to go through what we went through. We can come together again. You can still be a hero, Nick, but not like this," Jack pleaded. At that moment, the sound of sirens began to approach. Jack knew the police were coming, and he needed to act quickly. "Nick, you have to decide now. You can surrender and have a chance to start over, or continue on this path and lose everything." Nick looked at Jack, and the internal battle was visible on his face. The sirens became louder, and in a moment of clarity, he let go of his anger. "You're right, Jack. I don't want to do this." The door opened completely and, within moments, the police entered. "Hands up," one of the officers ordered. Jack looked at Nick and, with a nod, indicated that he should surrender. "I'll be here for you," he said softly. Nick raised his hands, and the police took him away. Jack felt a mixture of relief and sadness. He had saved lives again, not just that night, but also that of a lost friend. Now, more than ever, he was a symbol of hope and redemption, showing that even the most lost could still find a way back.